Good morning.
Oh, okay. It was on.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Commissioners online, you can hear me? Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Okay, very good. We're going to go live in a few minutes, so hold tight. And welcome to Dr. Bands.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I wish I could be with you virtually next month. I hope to meet everyone in person.
Nice to meet you, Kathleen.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I look forward to getting to know members of the commission and staff.
Welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Are we live? Can you hear us? Not live.
Yes,
Yes.
we hear you.
Yes, wonderful. Good morning, and welcome to Dr. Bands. I will formally introduce you once we go live.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the May Maryland Higher Education Commission hearing. I am here live in person at the MHEC building in downtown Baltimore with Secretary Sanjay Rai and Vice Chair and also Commissioner Agu. And we are joined online by several of the commissioners. We have a quorum. I see on the screen we have Dr. Bands, who's a new commissioner I will be formally introducing in a moment, as well as Dr. Burnham, Judge Howe, Dr. Thompson, Dr. Williams, and Dr. Warmack. Dr. Dukes and Ms. Tabor-Stalen are unable to join us, and I believe Dr. Serrano will be joining us soon as well. We are thrilled to be fully staffed up here in terms of commission appointees. We have all 12 appointees now with the addition today of Dr. Kathleen Bands. Welcome, Dr. Bands. I just want to give a little introduction. I know folks have read her bio, but just for the good of the order, Dr. Bands spent most of her professional career at Hood College, where she was professor of education and director of the doctoral programs in organizational leadership and business administration. She joined Hood in 1984 and has taught leadership development inside and outside of the classroom, served as the associate dean and dean of the graduate school, and the vice president for enrollment management. Dr. Bands helped Hood gain its original accreditation from the National Council for Accreditation of Teaching Education, and she has completed program development and program assessment grants for MSDE and standards-based teacher education programs. So she brings a wealth of experience to us at the commission. We are thrilled to have you with us, Dr. Bands, via Zoom. I'd like to turn it over to you to say a few words if you'd like, not to put you on the spot, but we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. And thank you for the warm welcome and the introduction. Secretary Rai, Maryland commissioners, Maryland higher education staff. I am excited thrilled and humbled to have been nominated and appointed to the board. For me, it's a dream come true, a way to continue my passion in higher education, and to have the time to do this now that I'm officially retired. I'm looking forward to getting to know each of you, and I hope that you will help me understand the work of the commission and how to really be a collaborative team member. I've always been so proud of higher education in Maryland. Even our PK to 12 education is exceptional, and I hope to continue that work so that there is something for all students here in Maryland. I am excited and passionate about the field of education, having spent a significant portion of my career here in Maryland. I started when I was very young, so I loved being in higher education and that passion and purpose that education has brought to my life. And I would like to end with a quote. Nelson Mandela said, "Education is the most powerful weapon we can use to change the world." And I hope that you will help me make a contribution to MHEC and also to change the world in the ways that we see will make it better for all of us. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Bands, and welcome. Dr. Bands and I had an opportunity to connect earlier this week, and she shared her vision for MHEC and her work here in terms of being very student-focused. And I told her she would fit right in, because that is certainly the way that Dr. Rai is leading the agency and the worldview of the rest of us commissioners. So welcome to you. I'd like to turn the floor over to, as part of my opening remarks, to Vice Chair Agu, who has some updates that he'd like to share.
Sure. First of all, good morning, and Dr. Bands, welcome so much. You're part of an amazing group of commissioners that I'm very lucky to be a part of, as well as working with an amazing staff here at MHEC. So I look forward to working with you. Two updates. One regarding the kind of stakeholder input process for the updated completion goals that we are working on in concert with HCM Strategies, which will update our 2025 completion goal and figure out what comes after that. One thing that we talked about last meeting was that we want much more input from industry, who of course is a key stakeholder. And so we've been fortunate to have agreement from the Greater Washington Partnership, which is a partnership of companies from Baltimore all the way to Richmond, many of whom do business in Maryland, willing to basically share out our survey so that they can give their input. And they have also offered, if we are amenable, to actually gathering their Maryland companies to speak with us about their additional input once we have draft goals and even beforehand. Similarly, the Greater Baltimore Committee, we are working on doing the same, and getting Greater Baltimore Committee, which many people know are our biggest regional companies here in the Greater Baltimore area. Second, which I would add, is as we think about the update now legislatively mandated of the higher education plan for the state, we will be restarting the Education Policy Committee, chaired by myself. And I also want to really thank my fellow commissioners who will sit on that committee, Commissioner Williams, Commissioner Dukes, Commissioner Tabor-Stalen, and Commissioner Serrano. I very much thank them for taking on additional work when they already have big and very full plates. But that will ideally have the creation of the higher education plan work in concert with the completion goals. Also in line with our mandates from the legislature from this past session. So I'll throw it back to you, Chair, but hopefully that's helpful for folks.
Thank you, Vice Chair Agu. Any questions for Commissioner Agu? All right, just a couple of housekeeping matters. Now that we are at our full complement of 12, our new quorum number will be 7, just doing the math, 7 out of 12. And we are above quorum here. Since I mentioned the attendance earlier, we've been joined by Commissioner Serrano. So 9 of us are present today. The only thing that I would add to Commissioner Agu's comments is another update that is related. We have spoken amongst ourselves about the potential of having a statewide student success summit led by MHEC in coordination with the governor's office. And I've been in touch with the governor's office last week, and we are hoping to do that with the governor's participation on either November 14th or 15th. We're trying to nail down a date and a location, a neutral statewide location, potentially here in Baltimore City. And I want to thank my fellow commissioners who have answered the volunteer call. Since you got to thank your team, I want to thank my team. Also Dr. Dukes, who I think we have in common, but also Dr. Serrano, Dr. Thompson, and Dr. Warmack. So I will be following up with you specifically, but I just wanted folks to know that is in process. The governor's office is excited about it, and the hope is that the governor himself will attend and lead the initiative. So more to come on that. I will now turn it over to our confirmed secretary, Dr. Rai.
Thank you, Chair Mars. Thank you, commissioners. I also want to add my very, very warm welcome to our Commissioner Kathleen Bands to Maryland Higher Education Commission. I thank you for your service to Hood College for many years. I was at Montgomery College, and I had an opportunity to work and come up with several agreements, especially in the articulation area. And I thank everyone at Hood College for that work, and certainly your leadership there. Coming back to our meeting today, we have a very ambitious agenda as usual. It reflects the hard work that's happening at Maryland Higher Education Commission in advancing access to higher education for all residents of Maryland. You will hear updates, especially on our financial aid, Office of Financial Aid. What are we doing to advance financial aid opportunities for students, removing barriers? As you know, this year we had some challenges from the federal government side, and I want to thank every member of Office of Student Financial Aid at MHEC for going beyond the call of duty to make sure that students have access to these financial barriers. We will hear from our academic affairs team. They will talk about enrollment projections, but I also want to add one thing that's not on their agenda today is academic program approval. Academic program approvals are happening, especially in the areas where there are no comments or objections. Just in the 6 weeks starting from 1st April to May 15th, 21 academic programs have been approved, and I'm following the average time of approval. They have all been done within times, and in many cases they have been approved before the 60-day period. Again, I want to thank all our colleagues in Office of Academic Affairs, and I return the forum back to you, Chair.
Those are wonderful updates, and Dr. Dow, congratulations to you and your team. The next item on the agenda is public comments, and I'm told by Ms. Ng that we have no public comments today. So we will move on to minutes approval. The minutes were distributed in advance of this meeting. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Moved by Judge Howe. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Burnham. Any comment? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? All right, the minutes have been approved. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is from the Department of Finance Administration, which is led by Mr. Jeffrey Newman, and with him will be Mr. Al Dorsett, who continues to be the hardest working man in state government, leading our Office of Student Financial Assistance through this very bumpy financial aid season. So, Mr. Newman and Mr. Dorsett, you have the floor.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners, Mr. Secretary. I am pleased to turn this over to Al for an update on student financial aid.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, Mr. Secretary, and Commissioners. If we could bring up the... Thank you. If we could bring up the slide presentation. It's enrollment.
Minimize the other one. The middle one. No, here. No. one? Do the slideshow. Yeah,
And are we sharing?
yeah. And then it'll share over here, and you can just
Okay.
move them back and forth with the cursors or with the mouse.
Okay, okay. So again, good morning, Dr. Rye, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. Just an update on 24-25 financial aid and FAFSA information. We'll talk about the wrong one. This is the wrong one, Anthony.
I put them on here yesterday. No, make me get down here. Was it one of the ones? I thought it was this one here.
All right, so stretch that. Let's expand that, because I put the date.
Not Debbie Sheridan. Date modified. I'm worried it's not on.
Get the most recent
I swear I swear.
That's
I
all
had it
right,
on
that's
here
all right, we
yesterday.
won't.
No. Did you email it to me?
I emailed it to Debbie.
Debbie? Don't worry about it. Okay,
Don't worry about it.
okay. Go back to the main screen. Okay. Sorry about that.
It's all right.
I put the times put on there yesterday, but.
It's okay. I'll come up earlier next time.
Okay, sorry.
Practice it. Okay. So my apologies. We do not have the presentation, but I'll discuss the updates. So as many of us know, the federal government enrolled or output the new FAFSA based off the FAFSA Simplification Act for 24-25. The federal government ran into, of course, their own types of issues in which the FAFSA was delayed in being open. Us receiving the institutional student information records along with institutions was delayed. And then once we received those records, there were certain errors. In addition to that, with the rollout and the change with the FAFSA, MHEC ran into certain issues with our NDCAP system, which we've been addressing immediately as we've hit those issues to resolve those issues. So we did start out with awarding students. We awarded about 2,000 students, a mixture of GA renewal students, GA initial students, as well as some EA renewal students. With that initial awarding, we did run into some issues where there were incorrect award amounts on students. Certain students had errors for their award as showing ineligible due to a negative 1,500 SAI, as well as we had certain calculation issues with the MHEC 1 app. So we've been focused on resolving those issues and recently have brought the system down to the public so that we could address those issues immediately and efficiently. The system is pushed to come back up available at 3 p.m. Tomorrow. We have resolved those issues. Just a little bit example, or just a little example and information about the MDCAP system. Based off how the system was originally built, the system has to do a recalc process on a nightly basis. That recalc process literally updates the record with updated information. So anytime we bring in new FAFSAs, anytime that we make any corrections, or even if a student makes an adjustment to their FAFSA record, that recalc process runs. Unfortunately, with our current system, the way that the recalc process runs, even if it's one or a group of students that need that adjustment to update their information, it runs over every student that is in the system. So the recalc process happens routinely, and it's an extended type of process. Now, the recalc process also unfortunately slows down the system with the recalc process running and then individuals on the system, which has caused times where the system has abruptly shut down. We've had to reload the server so that the system could come back up. Sometimes there's different errors. So to address that issue, we usually run recalcs on a nightly basis, usually at 7 p.m., so that anybody working on the system during regular business hours is not impacted by this, and then the recalc process could run and hopefully doesn't get slowed down. With the errors that we occurred, the reason why we needed to shut down the system is that we wanted it to run efficiently, and waiting on each night for it to run, we would not be able to identify when it would take to get through all those records, whether it be 2, 3, or 4 days. So therefore, that's why we shut down the system, making that judgment call. But with these issues, we've resolved the MHEC One app issues. So now students will be able to see the MHEC One app. We've resolved the negative 1500 SAI, so it can read students' SAI and calculate their eligibility correctly, and we'll be able to award students. Of course, I will not say that no issues will never arise again. I'll never be one to say that, but I want to push that with every issue that arises, we immediately try to make corrections to these issues, because we understand and fully believe that we need to award our students as early and as efficiently as possible so that they can make their decisions. So our push still is to award students immediately, which we have a recalc finishing up today, and then we'll be awarding our process, or running our award process, so that when students have availability or ability to look into the system tomorrow, they will actually see their awards, and notifications of awards will go out to students. So any questions before
Commissioner Burnham has a question.
Yes.
Yes, so thank you for that report. So that means that everything you wanted to do during the system shutdown has been accomplished, and you're ready to go?
Yes. I think we're doing a check-in about every 3-4 hours each day, making sure that everything's right, making sure there's no errors, going over each of the issues, looking at them in the test environment, and then because the system is shut down, it does allow us to look into the production environment as well, to make sure that everything that happened in the test environment matches the production environment. So far we've been very good on that. It's been efficient, it's been running, and we're ready to start awarding within about an hour or so.
Great, thank you.
And if I may briefly say, this has been a function of this system for several years now, that when we have to run a recalculation, it runs recalculations on all the records in the system, and it needs to be shut down. Which also is, it's refreshing to know that we're now looking for a new system, because I think we need to get up to modern technology and not have this issue occur in future years.
What is the timeline for the RFP? Is the expectation that a year from now we will have a new system?
That is the push and expectation. Currently, we have several proposals that the committee is reviewing and are pushing forward on, I guess.
To make a decision on who the contractor will be for the new system. So we hope to have that done within the next month.
So the gear with a new system is to have a system in which we can run population selections on individuals, in which it would pick up only students that need a recalc and run on those individuals, leaving other students behind. To run batch processes on individuals. The biggest piece is just looking at the population selections in order to run certain processes on those individuals and have those processes set up that we can schedule those processes, that we can run output reports on those processes as they run to know what's going on with that. As Mr. Newman said, this has been a practice every year that we've had to shut down the system to award students. The difference that we have is prior, when we had the March 1st deadline, we had all FAFSAs in at that point in time, and it wasn't a change in those FAFSAs. So we would shut down the system for a week and basically run the award on all students. With the change in the FAFSA and us extending the deadline time, there's a few key pieces where we're still pulling in FAFSAs. The federal government still has not released paper FAFSAs, so individuals that have done paper FAFSAs we're still waiting for. We received FAFSAs that were completed in January and March, so we're still receiving FAFSAs on a daily basis. And then we still have students who are making corrections. Additionally, we have students that are indicating that they completed their FAFSA and we don't have their FAFSA yet. The federal government has no way right now of institutions or state agencies to retrieve students' FAFSAs. We're waiting on that, which they said that should be available in June. So in those cases, we're researching to make sure that the FAFSA was never delivered. In some cases, we have to look through maybe 50 or 100 different records to put a student's information in to see if the FAFSA or their record is somewhere in that ISA record. So that's where it's a kind of real complicating and mixed up process this year, that the effects of the federal government's changes is now not necessarily only affecting them, but feeding into more of institutional and state aid processes.
And to answer your earlier question, our MHEC's goal is to have this new system up and running July 1st, 2025, which was also in the legislation that mandated that we pursue
July
a
of
new system.
2025, so not next financial aid season.
Right.
Okay, that's an important calendar update, an important distinction. So a year from now, when
Yes.
you're back, presumably back to your March 1st deadline after these FAFSA kinks have been worked out, we're still going to be dealing with this system.
Well, we're anticipating that we won't have the additional factors of this changeover in FAFSA occurring, where everything was delayed, coming out of the federal government. Next year, we're hoping and expecting that the usual awarding process will occur, and we'll have the March 1st deadline, and we'll be able to do it as we've done it in the past. But yes, we will have to take the system down to run recalcs, briefly. It'll still run the way it's running now, but we hope we don't have this additional major impact factor next year. Everything will be worked out.
Right, but it'll still be the current system.
It'll still be the current system. That's correct.
Okay, so I know the team has been working around the clock, and we're very grateful to both of you and the full team. Please give us an additional update next month. After this financial aid season is mostly over, I'd like to do an after action about lessons learned so that we can prevent this next year, sort of learning from the federal government, testing things in advance. And so when things roll around next year, when we're still stuck with the current system, it can go as smoothly as possible, with the understanding that we won't have a better system until 2 financial aid seasons from now.
Yes.
Okay, but
absolutely.
we really, this has been very bumpy. I also commend you all for your routine communications to stakeholders. I know that Mr. Coley, who I see in the background, was leading communications to over 100,000 people, to include students and families, of course, local education agencies, public school systems, the General Assembly, the legislature, anyone who's on your listserv, nonprofits like where I work in my day job. And I think everybody gets that it's frustrating and that it started many months ago with the better FAFSA. But it's now getting to be the end of the school year. High school seniors are graduating. They're leaving the building. School counselors are having a harder time reaching them to amend the FAFSA and to work with NDCAP. So really every day is crucial because as we've seen, that the numbers are nationally lower and statewide lower with respect to FAFSA completion. And of course, you know better than we do that at the end of the day, that means that more students with a financial need, more low-income students, are going to be missing out on a college experience, which is really a tragedy, particularly because this is the class that was in 8th grade
Right.
when COVID hit. So they didn't get their 8th grade graduation. They had 9th grade remotely, And here they are with this FAFSA challenge. It's very disappointing that this has turned out this way for these students. So I encourage you to keep up the good work and to do as much as you can to try to raise the FAFSA numbers and tackle these issues while the high school seniors are still in the building and have professionals who can help them with the technicalities of what is, unfortunately, a very complicated process.
Yes, yes.
Any other questions from fellow commissioners?
I have one.
Oh, yes.
I have one comment, but Mr. Newman, go ahead first.
I just wanted to say, I believe following the last commission meeting, we sent you the RFPs.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. No. And very much. And actually, that's exactly what my question went to, which is the having been a part of a few IT integrations in my career, it's kind of like building a bridge. I find that deadlines slip continually.
Yes.
This is a case where that cannot happen. Like, this actually has to be July 1st. One thing I would ask also going forward, and this can be part of Mr. Dorset, your report, and hopefully it's not too much work. I would love to know where that vendor is once chosen against their timeline. Meaning, are we actually on track with the Gantt chart? Because I have very much seen in many years across many industries, 1 or 2 months before this thing's supposed to, oh, I'm sorry, this is going to slip 1, 2, 3 months. I have seen year-long extensions of projects of this magnitude, and they can happen, and most orgs absorb that. It can't happen here.
Right.
And that's not going to be on you all. And then one particular question, just because I don't understand how it works in state government, does MHEC manage that kind of contract and integration directly, or just do it on MHEC's behalf? Just so I understand who's responsible for what.
It's the combination of the agency and Do It, because we
Okay.
are an enterprise agency with Do It.
That's what I assumed. Okay, that's super helpful. I think to the extent that we can make sure that we are on track kind of every step of the way, and I imagine they should be delivering you a very clear Gantt chart for the next year, and just keeping them to account on that I think will be helpful, and we are happy to also serve that purpose too.
Very good.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Dorset and Mr. Newman?
Yes, so thank you again. I think it will be important to note a couple of things here. Number one, we didn't receive these ICER data until end of April. It's supposed to come in March 1st. And when it was coming in March 1st, it allowed us time, a week, to shut down the system. The other, I think, a new complication is because federal government changed the formulas. So all the formulas at our end, all the SQL formulas needed to be changed. And we certainly want to be very ambitious and not shut down the system for a week or so. We want to start awarding soon. So I appreciate that you are taking that seriously. The other thing I'll say that Chair Mott's comment about next month doing an analysis, and we should not make an assumption that next year everything will be good and we will get the data March 1st. I was at a national meeting yesterday. A lot of stuff that has happened. Maybe I have no direct knowledge, but some of that is patchwork to make problems go away for a short time. But on the federal side, they have to come back and clean all that up. So we have to be prepared to have very similar situation and learn from this so that we can do everything at our end to award these scholarships as soon as possible. Second, sort of good news, we are in touch with institutions of higher education statewide, and what we are hearing is that number of applications have gone up. Applications for admissions have gone up. Institutions have admitted students, and some of them have not completed FAFSA. So we should not expect that it's all done. We will be getting more applications. We have to be ready for that. And I'm very happy that we are working very closely with institutions of higher education. So I think that process is important. In terms of this new system that we would like to get, our current system has several challenges from our side when we award, but it has challenges for students also. when they apply, they don't have a shopping cart system. They need only specific kind of technology to do the applications. We are hoping for a shopping cart system. We are hoping for smartphones, a student can access this. So it's a combination of effort. And again, it's a complicated project. If you look at the requirements are so much that really we are looking for a really good vendor, and very appreciative of support from Department of General Services, Do It. They have all been very supportive, and it's lot of decisions are in your hands, and these agencies are there to help you and support you. Thank you.
And Secretary Rao, you definitely hit right on the mark. One, the federal government gave about 100 test ICERs before they gave and allowed us to import the ICER records. So the test ICERs in nowhere were as complex as many of these ICER records we received, which is why different complications came up. Pointing out to next year, HB 923 that was passed in 2023 has it during the 25-26 academic year where the schools will be actually awarding the GA students. So there it's going to be more simplified. We still need to do the test. We still need to have the processes prepared, which we'll definitely have for you. But it will be more so where we provide a ranking list to the institutions of individuals that are potentially eligible for the GA based off the FAFSAs we receive, and those institutions will be going through. We've met with representatives from the General Assembly to kind of talk about HB 923 to make sure everything is working smoothly, and we'll continue to meet with them just to make sure that it's a process developed within legislation and that we have that just makes it as easy and efficient as those students who are eligible for the grant. So Secretary's right, we can't guarantee that nothing will change with the federal government and the FAFSA. At the same point in time, we know that we won't hit as many of these complications because it won't be us processing and awarding the individuals. It'll more so be us providing a list to the institutions, and they will go through awarding the individuals and then updating us on who they have awarded.
So I'm glad to hear that you're meeting with the legislature about this. Are we also meeting with the financial aid directors at the institutions about this so they can learn from our experience? Because someone's going to have to be processing it. So if it's not MHEC, it's going to be the colleges and their financial aid offices, right?
Yes, so we've been repeatedly meeting with the financial aid directors and the FAC community especially. As we meet with General Assembly members and any updates, we update them on this. Special note, today we're doing a promise session with the community colleges for the promise for the upcoming 24-25 year and going through that new process because that's turned into a decentralized program. So they've received their allocations. We're going through the process of them receiving their allocations, them updating their rosters of who they're awarding, how to work those rosters, timing of those rosters so that they can determine if they need to transition funding or not, and then the reconciling of those funds. So those type of workshops, we are gearing up to have more of them on all of our programs and really help the institutions go through the processes and identifying the legislation to tie that to the institutions so they are aware of those different processes, how it connects with legislation.
Okay. And do we need, I'm looking at our Assistant Attorney General, do we need any regulations related to the decentralizing of the administration of the GA for next financial aid season?
So we are reviewing all regulations currently. So we're going through.
So we may need new regulations.
Yes, they may need to be tweaked, or they will need to be tweaked, but we've already started working on them and meeting with.
Okay. So I absolutely think we should do an after action. I think next month may not be the right time because I think I want you to focus on, I think we all want you to focus on solving the problems and then doing the learnings later in the summertime. But I really think that to the extent that we're not going to be doing this next year and the institutions are, we should be looping them in as soon as possible with our lessons learned and maybe share the after action with them or convene a big meeting with them so that there's a lot of communication, because I know you all have learned a lot here.
Yes.
And I hope that, you know, the institutions will get the benefit of that knowledge if they're going to be the ones doing the awards next year. Right.
And for Commissioner Bands, we have you heard Al mention FAC, which is our Financial Aid Advisory Council, which meets regularly with MHEC staff to discuss financial aid issues. So that's how we get a lot of this information out to the financial aid community.
Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is Mr. Derek Coley, who leads MHEC's Department of External Relations.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners, and Secretary Rye. I just want to provide a update. In your packet was a memo, May 9th memo, that we submitted to the Governor's Office outlining all of the steps we've taken with respect to communicating FAFSA, the completion and importance, but also some of the challenges as well, but more importantly also the partnerships. The Governor's Office asked an interesting question as it relates to how Maryland ranks across the country with other states. And in our research, one of the things that we discovered is that when this memo was written, first and foremost, Maryland was ranked 18th. Currently, as of this morning, we're now around 22nd, 23rd in the country. In the PowerPoint presentation I have here, I'll just share some of the information with you regarding one of the questions the Governor's Office asked with respect to how do we rank with those states who require the FAFSA as a graduation completion piece before students are able to graduate. Which one do you need? Perfect. Oh, right there. And again, as of this morning, 22nd, 23rd, and the legislation that was passed in the state of Maryland in 2023 looked at, I'm sorry, in 2021, Senate Bill 664 looked at asking MSDE to ask the local education agencies across the state to encourage, not make it a mandate, but to encourage local education agencies to have the ability to ask students to complete the FAFSA. We do not have a legislative mandate that requires students. You have to download it. Yeah, I did. We do not have legislation that requires students to actually be required to complete the FAFSA before graduation. In the PowerPoint presentation that was also shared, one of the things that we found out was that in terms of the state rankings, the mandate varies, and there is a sunshine rainbow in some of this information. Initially, the state of Alabama was ranked 27th in the beginning of May. They've since moved to the 18th position. And when I say the sunshine and rainbow, as you all can imagine where we are now, we are in the precipice of the graduation season for high school students. So as a result of us being in the graduation season, those states who in fact have the mandate requirement, you will see them moving up in the FAFSA rankings across the country because of that mandate requirement. Illinois was 5th. It only moved up 2 points to 3rd. California was 15th. In fact, it moved to 9th in the national FAFSA rankings for completion. Texas was also 9th, and it moved to 5th. But again, Alabama, again, moved to the 18th position from 27th. And for whatever reason, I have to do a little bit more digging, but Colorado is still ranked around 43rd, below the number 40.
Mr. Coley, do we have any information about whether that translates to college enrollment and increased graduation rates?
We do not. When you say increasing graduation in high school level or
No, college.
College level,
Yeah.
we do not.
And we don't even know about college graduation rates. So we know these young people have done the FAFSA, but we don't know if they're actually going to college.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely, Chair. And so that's another question in terms of where are these students going once they're mandated to complete the FAFSA in some of these states and so forth. And again, this may be something that we may want to look at in the state of Maryland to look at a full scope of.
It has been looked at. There was a bill.
And it died.
And I think the bill that you cite was a compromise bill.
It was a compromise,
Yes.
watered down, but we may have to put some teeth in with respect to where we are this year to say, hey, let's look at it again based on some of the criteria. But more importantly, there are a lot of more financial tools as well that the state of Maryland offers that some of the students may not know about, but they can get ahead of the curve if they do complete the FAFSA. As they say, it's better to apply and be told no versus not apply and still be told no because you were too late in terms of application. That's been our message going out, as you see in the memo that I shared with you all, the in-person town halls and other meetings. We've been telling folks, whether or not if you're going to college, please apply and complete the FAFSA. It's better to be prepared than unprepared at the end of the day. Also, I share with you, I'm not sure if you all can see this in the PowerPoint, some of the metrics. I know some of you commissioners may have questions in terms of the reach and the depth and breadth. Chair Motz spoke about it briefly during Al's presentation. There are roughly 113,000 individuals on our GovDelivery listserv that we've reached out to. As you can see in the last slide, there's about a 99% completion rate with about 1,900 some odd individuals who are heirs. We also are tracking how many folks actually click open the updates that we send out, whether it's MD caps or just the message saying, please complete the FAFSA. And we think that we have fine-tuned the system in a sense of making sure that we're tracking these metrics each time. Alexia in our office is tracking this each time a message goes out, so we'll know what's going on in real time in terms of the results and the data information and so forth. Are there any questions?
We can't see the screen, so I'm not sure if my fellow commissioners have any questions. Commissioners, if you want to just speak up, because we can't see you raising your hand if you are raising your hand. Oh, thank you. Looks like no questions from the commission. Dr. Rai?
Yeah, just a comment. As part of, we will hear probably in the More Mirror plan, we have data on FY23, certainly not FY24 yet, on how many students from Maryland received federal aid and how many dollars. We do want to think and set some kind of goal that, X% increase in number of students receiving aids and X% in number of dollars. The more students will apply, certainly that will translate in some increase in enrollment. And when the students are accessing higher education, certainly that is a good thing because that will reflect in completion. How much that data is a great question, is not known, at least at this point. So we do want to look at the FY23 data very carefully and analyze that better and set up some kind of state goal for that.
Absolutely, and I think, keeping in mind doing it in collaboration with our friends and partners who share our building here at MSDE and working with the K-12 system with the high schools, because, they've got the counselors and the team, and making sure that it's not an unfunded mandate, because it's a lot of extra work, and we just want to make sure that the counselors are equipped with what they need to make this mandatory if that's the direction that the state decides to go. Thank you, Mr. Coley. And
Thank you,
any
Chair.
other questions or comments? Okay. Here we go. Next, we'll be hearing from Dr. Emily Dow, who leads the Department of Academic Affairs, and with her is Dr. Barbara Schmertz, who oversees the Office of Research and Policy Analysis.
Thank you, Chair Motz and Commissioners. I'm just going to turn the time directly over to Dr. Schmertz and Dr. Lin for their presentation. Thank you.
What is this? It was working over here, but now it's something's happened here.
Just press the access. Try this again.
This screen is froze.
Oh, I see. It's okay. Let me see if I can do anything. Test the manager. Yeah, from beginning. Yes. You can just
I
walk
don't
through
know what I
the
hit
handout.
over here.
Let me see if I can quit everything and restart everything from the beginning.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
PowerPoint and task. Yeah.
Okay.
This is in my and this is mine. Let's see if it works.
So when you want to get back to them at the end, just exit and minimize.
Okay.
I'm your steerer, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's start.
So, good morning. Yes, good morning. Thank you. Thank you for being patient while we worked through the technical difficulties. We believe we may have championed the PowerPoint process. So, we are sitting before you for an annual opportunity to share with you the enrollment projections. As you see, this is an action item, and this supports the Jeff's team in making decisions about capital projects. So for commissioners who are more seasoned, as well as our brand new commissioner, there is a bit of review of how this works. And of course, this is also summarized. You have the PowerPoint in your packet as well as the memo. So, Dr.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lin. Almost all of us are new since July 1st. So this will be new for almost all of us. Yes. So thank you, Dr. Lin. We look forward to your presentation.
Okay, so thank you so much. So thank you, Chair Moss, and thank you so much for Secretary and the Commissioners. So I'm here to present the enrollment projections 2024 to 2023 for Maryland public colleges and universities. Let me remind you, we only predict for public institutions. We do not predict the enrollment for private or independent institutions. So, and then like you can find the memo from the page 9 on your commission book, and also in your handout materials, you should find the whole report that include more detailed numbers and detailed methodology and assumptions we used for predicting the numbers. So I will guide you through the numbers during my presentation, but feel free to take closer looks of all of the numbers while you have time. So let me just double click that.
Nope.
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 Oh, no, it's coming. Great. So as Dr. Schmertz just explained, there was background about this enrollment projection. So Maryland Higher Education Commission was charged to produce a 10-year enrollment projection for Maryland public colleges and universities. So by regulation, so we are producing these enrollment projections to use by the college to prepare capital construction project. And so most importantly, you will approve this the thing called project the 10-year full-time equivalent enrollment. That will be used as the proposed capacity of the college in number of the students. So in short, this is we predict how many students we need to educate 10 years from now, and then the finance team will use this number to predict the capital construction project. So, and so next page. So let me remind you again, so the MHAC enrollment projections are different from individual institutions' projections. You may heard from the other institutions, they also have their own enrollment projections, but they majorly conducted their projections based on their individual campus plan. But for MHAC, actually, we answer this question differently. We're trying to answer this question 10 years from now, how many Marylanders we need to educate, and we need to create enough space for institutions to hold this student on campus. And then, so the way we actually answer this question is we find out the potential enrollment. So you can imagine this is as we cook a pie. And we need to decide how large the pie we need to cook for a student. And then we give each pie to each institution. So we started from the segment level projections. So for segmental enrollment projection, we separated our projection by the sectors, enrollment intensities, and by the level of enrollment. So specifically, we actually predict the full-year undergraduate full-time, full-year undergraduate part-time, graduate full-time, and part-time. And for community college, we predict the community college full-time, that is undergraduate, and also part-time. And then next step is we give each institution a pie. And so this is based on something we call market share. So that is the proportion of institutional enrollment out of the total statewide enrollment per each segment, each sector, and each level. So for public 4 years.
I'm sorry. Is it your intent to change the slides as you do the presentation? Because mine are not changing. Can the rest of the commissioners see as she goes from one slide to another?
Dr. Burnham, we are on the potential enrollment slide. Do you not see that?
I only see part of it.
I see it now. All right. Thank you. Sorry.
No. Just want to make sure that everyone can see. The slide is populating slowly, so hopefully you will see that. If you do not, just give us a shout, and we'll try and resolve.
Yes, please do give us a shout because we can see the slides, but we cannot see you all.
Thank you for that reminder. So, so then for public 4 year, and we based on the total statewide number and the institutional market share, and we estimate how many students each public 4 year institution need to educate as the undergraduate full-time, undergraduate part-time, graduate full-time, and part-time. And for community college, and we give them each a pie, slice of a pie on undergraduate, part-time, and full-time. So that is how we determine the enrollment for each institution. And I just mentioned what is really matter for the finance team is the thing called full-time equivalent. And so this is how we transfer this headcount enrollment to full-time equivalent. So full-time equivalent basically is say we have both part-time and full-time student. We have to convert them to the full-time equivalent and make sure the student get the equal resources. So for getting this number, we use some math formula and transfer this headcount number to the full-time equivalent. And there is another thing called full-time day equivalent. So that is the number used to reflect the peak hour campus resources uses by the finance team. So that is to see if you have a campus and you want to give student enough resources, and then they need to predict how many students actually use these resources in the peak hour or daytime. So that is how we actually transform everything from the big pie to the slice, and then transfer that number to a number that we will use for the capital budget. And then let me remind you again, so for the full-time day equivalent, and so UMGC is not included because they are majorly online education, so that is why the number was not included in full-time day equivalent number. And finally, there is a standalone non-credit projection. So non-credit basically reflect the full-time equivalent student numbers, and this is just for community college only.
If we go back to the other slide, I had one or two questions. On the non-credit portion, and again, I'm looking at national trends. Non-credit is and I even see it in your later slide, obviously that enrollment is going up fairly dramatically. Is it mainly concentrated only in community colleges? My understanding when I look across the country is that generally even 4 years you're seeing an increase in non-credit credentials as well. But I'm just curious why that's only calculated for community colleges.
Great question. I believe, and I don't want to speak for the finance team, they are currently looking into a recalculation of taking into the sort of modern world of non-credit education, whether it be community colleges and expanding. So part of this is the assumptions and presumptions of the model as it has stood for the period of time in which the model has been in existence. So this model was created in the 90s, has been perpetuated. It used to be done by a consultant, it's now brought internally. So in short, I think non-credit is under discussion and debate amongst the finance staff as to how to reintegrate that more in a more modern way into what we know is non-credit education in the state of Maryland.
Let me make one comment and then maybe a question, which is as we think about the completion goal that we're going to be creating, where I expect non-credit will be a bigger part of what we're tracking, as well as the next iteration of the higher ed plan. I would very much encourage that we think about the role of non-credit outside of the community college space, because I expect it'll be more and more of what we're looking at. But Dr. Rai, it sounds like you have a comment as well.
Yeah, so I think we have a work group that's working on the non-credit, how to use that in space calculations. Even non-credit work at community colleges is not fully reflected so far in the space calculations. So Dan, you want to come up and say a few words quickly? Same goes for online education.
That was actually my next question.
It's not happening only at one institution. So.
Right. That was actually my next question, which is how does the move to online or hybrid also affect this for more institutions? But it sounds like we'll have an expert tell us.
Hello, everybody. For the record,
the light needs to be on.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. For the record, my name is Dan Schuster. I'm the Capital Finance Analyst here at MHEC. I'd like to talk a little bit about some of these questions. So, previously, when we do space needs calculations, we didn't count the needs associated with non-credit. Starting this year, we are going to do that.
Oh, wow.
As far as these enrollment are concerned, we also, so we calculate the current need and we calculate the projected need. Okay, and so what they're going over today is helping us calculate what the need is going to be in 10 years. We are going to incorporate the non-credit projections in there as well. They have included, and it's a, you guys can go over that, but they have included enrollment to be in 10 years, and those are also going to be incorporated into our space needs calculations.
I think that that's super helpful. I think, and again, I think for the community colleges, first of all, I didn't know that this hadn't been done previously, so that's actually a helpful piece of context. So I know generally those jumps don't happen all at once. I do think as we look forward, and again, this is just in my conversation with some of our four-year segments, this will be a bigger part of what they do, bluntly, because of the workforce needs, as well as the pandemic has changed a bunch of things. And so I want to make sure that we're able to stay on top of that trend and make sure that the finances and capital allocations reflect that. So thank you. Those were all my questions.
I have a question. So I'm looking at the law, the statute that explains why you're doing this, these projections, and it looks like it's the real reason to do it is for capital construction planning for the next 10 years. Is that right? So given it and the fact that the world has changed, I'm just wondering if, in addition to what Commissioner Agu said about building in non-credit, are you taking into account that for capital purposes, you may not have as many in-person students as in years past?
I can take that as well. So our space needs calculations do incorporate whether or not the person is attending online or in person. And so if they need a classroom or a class lab, we use what's called weekly student contact hours, which is their time in the instructional space to consider the needs. For the online students that don't require space on campus, necessarily in the instructional space, we do count our other categories of space, support needs, assembly space, lounge space, library space. Just because they're not attending a classroom on campus doesn't mean they don't need space in those other areas to be figured into the plan. And so we do incorporate their needs in those other categories of space that I mentioned.
That's helpful. And then in the past, over the past, I guess, 9 months since we've been here, we've had presentations about these regional centers that you have. Is that part of the calculation?
We don't currently calculate needs on the regional centers. We could if we need to later, but currently we focus on the campuses.
I just think that, you know, given that COVID has changed the world and we're doing 10-year projections, we should think about the way that the world will be and not necessarily the way the world is now. And these regional centers, sounds like from the earlier presentations we've had, are gaining momentum and students find them very helpful, particularly working students. So I just thought maybe as we're planning, we should take that into account. Mr. Newman.
Yes, the regional centers are centers where institutions provide programs off their campus. The institutions count those enrollments in their enrollment, not necessarily for planning purposes, for capital projects. But the regional higher education center enrollments are counted at the home institutions from where they're getting their degree, from where they're taking their courses.
I see Commissioner Serrano has a question, but before we get to that, I just want to make sure I understand this because Dr. Lin, part of your initial slides, you said the MHEC enrollment projections are different from the individual institutions, and it sounds like that's what you're getting at too, Mr. Newman. It just seems like maybe we should maybe we are already working with the institutions so that we don't want different capital projections. I think we all want to agree on what the world's going to look like in 10 years in terms of capital needs for higher ed. So I don't know, is part of this that we connect with the institutions and look at what their projections are and their capital planning is?
So if I can answer this question is, we do not have enough information about the reason why individual institutions do their projection. We have slightly different purpose. So I can tell you this by the demand and supply side. So institutions, they actually have their supply side concerns, like say, I can only offer you this how many seats in next 10 years. But for Maryland, and this is my understanding, so basically we have to predict how many students potentially will be enrolled in those institutions. So we just want to make sure they have enough resources to educate those students. They may actually predict the enrollment by different perspectives and for different reasons, but so that is why I'm saying the methodology is different because the purpose are slightly different. So it's not saying like, we have totally two sets of numbers and none of them are working together. Is we probably produce the different numbers for different things.
So let me say two things. One, I think we were saying, Chair Mott says, just on the regional centers, then let me expand out. On the regional centers, if we believe that they're going to gather momentum, they may serve most students because the way of learning has changed. We want to make sure that we might need to invest capital there. This is just candidly. I think the second one is, so I'm thinking back to our September budget meeting, and I remember that very long deck of all the capital projects. And a question I had was, all those institutions came, all the segments came, and they all wanted us to build everything. And I imagine, you spent a lot of time on that. I was curious if there are ever disagreements. I'm curious if a project is denied because we say, we expect enrollment here to be this, or in this segment to be this. The institution says, no, it's going to be Y, and therefore, no, you should build that thing that we asked for. So I was curious to your point, is there a reconciliation because they are coming to us for capital? And I can imagine an institution, I know if I was a president, I might disagree with some of these projections so I can get the thing built that I want built.
Well, and I'll let Dan expound on it a little bit if you will, but what we do with these enrollment projections is we take them in and we put them into our space guidelines calculation. Mm-hmm. And what we do, we break it down by space types, classroom, office, laboratory, and we look at each institution as to where they are with respect to their projected space need. Do they have a surplus or a deficit in that type of space? And that informs our capital budget decisions. We do it here at MHEC. It's looked at the Department of Budget and Management Office of Capital Budgeting, and it's looked at the Department of Legislative Services. So each institution will have different levels of space needs depending upon, primarily driven by these enrollment projections. So that's where the state actually uses the MHEC enrollment projections as the state projections. Are there disagreements? I would say yes, often. As you heard when we had the budget meeting.
Yep.
So.
I think two commissioners had questions, Commissioner Serrano and then three, sorry, Commissioner Serrano, Commissioner Burnham, and then Commissioner Williams.
Yeah. So I just had a couple questions. Like one on the issue of FTE and headcount. Like, is there differentiation between community colleges and four-year institutions? Because I feel like we're kind of comparing apples and oranges here. Because I feel like community colleges would have a higher FTE enrollment and possibly a lower headcount enrollment, and that would not necessarily be reflected in how we're doing these projections. The other thing I also think is, like, if these projections are looking at funding for the next, based on a 10-year cycle, how do you account for some of these community colleges? I'm thinking like something like Warwick College and Cecil College in these more rural areas, or even Baltimore City, like they play an economic role in that community. How do you account for that? Because that's not really in the traditional realm of just kind of having students and in classrooms, but there's a role that these community colleges play in their communities as well. So how does that come in?
Yeah, so I can explain the FTE. So how we handle the FTE and headcount conversion. So basically, we treat every institution differently. So there is no same formula for every single institution, because they actually have different contact hours, as Mr. Schuster just explained. So basically, we give them different conversion ratio. So for example, I'm just making up this number just for the convenience of understanding. So say BCCC have one full-time student and 3 part-time student. And so we, according to their historical FTE numbers and headcount numbers, and we understand like usually those 4 students will transfer to 1.5 FTE if that's a historical trend. And so we will take the consideration of the trend and say, if next year BCCC have 10 students, and then we will use this formula to predict, so there will be an X number of FTE for BCCC. So this number, this ratio will be different for community college and for public 4 years. So basically every institution are different from each other because of their composition of the full-time, part-time, in-person and online student. And also it depends on if you're an online student or if you're so how many courses you take online. So basically those are the credit-based calculations. So if I can, if that explains your question, Commissioner Serrano.
Yeah, I guess in the second question, like in terms of the role that certain universities would play, and is that factored in at all, or is I feel like there's like, I'm thinking more of these rural areas where the community college does play like an anchor role in that community. Does that come into play?
Yeah, so I'll take this part of the question. So the space needs calculations are only one of the criteria that we look at. When a college proposes a capital project, they had to submit what's called a Part 1, Part 2 facility program that explains what the need is, why they think the project is justified, and what were some of the solutions that they came up with and studied before proposing this project. So the needs calculations are just part of the justification. So for example, we don't have enough classroom space. We have a deficit of classroom space on campus. That's why we're proposing to add this space. That could be part of the justification. And so we look at our data to see if that makes sense. However, just because our calculations say there could be a surplus or deficit of space doesn't mean that the project isn't warranted. And so, for example, a college might propose to build a workforce development type space for HVAC trades or that sort of thing. They might be showing that they have a surplus of lab space on campus, but guess what? None of the lab space is like that. You know, just because they might have a surplus of science labs doesn't mean they can teach HVAC trades in there. And so they might propose a project to build a certain type of space, and we might look at it and approve that program, and that has happened. Okay, so the space needs calculations are just one of the bits of criteria that we look at. It's not the whole picture. We have to approve the whole program. Hopefully that makes sense.
Can you talk a little bit about, since the question was specifically about community colleges, can you talk a little bit about how that works? Because for community colleges, state funds 50%. The other 50% comes from local government, number one. Number two, state funding is limited to I believe, $85 million or somewhere around that. And then MAC presidents go and kind of prioritize what is their priority. Can you explain?
Yeah,
that
correct. So
process?
the first part, so for community college capital projects, there's a state share and a local share. And it's between 50 and 75%, depending on the college. And I think I was here a couple months ago and talked about that formula for the next year. And so the second part of the question, there's only so much money to go around, right? There's only so much money to go around. The Department of Budget Management plans a certain amount for our program every year. If the requests exceed that amount, then we have to prioritize the projects, and that's where MAC gets involved. They developed a model over the years that we've endorsed to prioritize the projects. The space needs calculations factor into that. There's several other factors. And so when the requests exceed the need, then they look at the priority based on that model. The last few years, that hasn't happened, but it could happen again. And certainly for the four-year schools, there's usually way more projects than there is money for. And so DBM, in that case, has to make the decisions as to which projects it recommends be funded, and they take, you know, our space needs calculations into account, as well as everything that was outlined in the programs that were submitted by the schools.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Burnham? I think you're on mute.
Chair Motz, I believe that Commissioner Williams had his hand raised before I did, so I'll yield to him and then make my point. Well, I see him begging off, so I'll go ahead. I just wanted to make the point that actually was just made now. I sensed in the questions that were raised and concerns that were expressed by commissioners that there was really some concern about the degree to which these enrollment projections were done in collaboration with those at the institutions. And we were told that they are, which is accurate. But I wanted to emphasize that each of the public four-year institutions, with respect to their capital budgets, have to go before the Department of Budget and Management and make specific presentations regarding capital projects. And I can assure you that that is a rather grueling process where the institutions are really pushed to justify their enrollment projections because they are a critical part of the capital budget request. And so and those numbers, the numbers that are developed by MHEC in collaboration with the institutions, are there before DBM, who also take another look at those numbers and raise questions about them. So I think there's a good bit of interaction amongst these entities, and that provides a good assurance that wise decisions are made when it comes to state dollars for capital projects using the benefit of the best thinking that we have.
Thank you, Dr. Burnham. That's very helpful background. To date, my understanding is MHEC is not part of the capital budget conversation with DBM. Is that right? And I guess in your experience and also
No,
looking to.
MHEC was not there at the table in the meeting room, but the numbers that MHEC developed were there on the table,
Okay.
looked at by DBM as well as by the institution.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks. Commissioner Williams.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to the staff developing the report. I have just a few data questions that I'd like to get some clarity on. The first of which is, as I'm looking at the data, if the staff could share historically, how accurate has the MHEC data been over the decades? I think you said, we started in the 90s with a consultant, brought it in-house, but have you gone retrospectively over the last couple of decades to determine our accuracy and what actually happened?
So I definitely have some numbers.
Let me speak to that first. So in short, we do have some numbers to share with you. And I think when we present more of the methodology, some threads will be joined together between our findings and what it means for the state. So go ahead. Oh, you want me to speak? So in general, can we hold the question until we actually get through some more of the methods by which the projections are created to then add to, so that we can then point to, can we get closer to the end of our presentation, Commissioner Williams, before we answer this question?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just actual results compared to predictions is important for confidence in what we're sharing. So I'd love to learn more about that. And then later on, and might be more appropriate for the end, looking at the actual results that you're sharing for the 4 years, going from 153 to 159,000 for the community colleges, essentially flat from 76 to 77. I'd really like to have some conversation about those findings and what they really mean for investment, given that they're relatively flat a decade from now, and how that factors into our thinking and methodology and recommendations into the budget making process.
Sure, we'd love to actually share the numbers with you by the end of the presentation. And so let me proceed my presentation. And no. So this is not the right thing. Okay, so this is the base of our projection model, and so you can find the detailed assumptions and methodologies on the report from page 4 to page 6. So this is just a visual way to show you how we decided how large the pie we need to bake for our fellow institutions. So so the base of our projection is from the population projection. So we have to project how many people in Maryland that will be needed, educated in the next 10 years. So basically this is relied on the historical relationship between the population and enrollment. And then we rely on the projected population produced by Maryland Department of Planning, and we use their projection from 2024 to 2023, and we apply this historical relationship to the projected population, and we get this base enrollment number. And so we adjusted this number by several other factors. First is historical trend of enrollment, and second is high school graduate, and third is income, and the fourth is tuition level. And then now we know how many students in Maryland will be potentially enrolled in Maryland public institutions 10 years from now. And we have in-state enrollment numbers. So next step is to determine the out-of-state enrollment. To calculate out-of-state enrollment, we currently use the most current residency rate. And if that's a proportion of the in-state enrollment, we apply this ratio on top of the projected in-state enrollment, and we get out-of-state enrollment. And we add two numbers together, in-state and out-of-state, so that is our total segmental level statewide enrollment for each segment. So here I'm going to walk you through all of the numbers. So I focus on 10-year projections. So you can find individual institution level number on the report. From page 7 to 9 is the public full year, and from 12 to 13 is community colleges. And again, this is for head count enrollment, and so I will introduce you the FTE and FTE numbers momentarily. So MHAC predict that statewide total number will increase by 19.2 by fall 2033, and to the number of 334,766. And then public four-year undergraduate student will increase by 13.3% to 158,127. And public four-year graduate will increase by 32% to 51,084. And finally, community college student will increase by 22% to 125,555.
Can you, we are really grateful that you gave us the slides in advance, and I know my fellow commissioners, people are poring over them and taking notes. Can you talk a little bit about, I know you've described the formula, sort of how you bake the pie, but the why behind these numbers, the big drivers, because, you know, a lot of us in higher ed have been reading about this dip in the number of high school graduates because of the 2008 recession. Fewer people had children, so, you know, 2025, there are not going to be as many 17, 8-year-olds graduating. So how that factors in. So in terms of your pie baking, that would be a lower number for high school graduates. So that must have been offset by one of the other factors in your formula. Can you just kind of explain some of the big picture drivers of how you got to your numbers?
So definitely one big driver is we project, like, say, out of the student who aged from 14 to 19. So this is just one age group in our analysis. What is the percentage of the student will go to, for example, community college full-time? And then this number has been declining for many years. So when the model try to incorporate this downward trend is basically say, we take the past several years average. So basically when we see additional 1 year lower number, so this number will be averaged to a lower average proportion relationship between the population and enrollment. So that is how actually we predict that some downward trend experienced by community college. And so basically we predict this number, the number of the proportion of the student who will attend community college as a full-time student will decline, and then we actually adjust this number to a lower level, and so that will be reflected as a part of this phenomenon everyone observed in past several years. Does that make sense?
So I think you're asking two questions. One is, I believe you want to know what the theory of operation is behind this model and why, like, how this model takes into account reality versus.
Yes. I'm always interested in reality. That's true.
So Yushin's answer gets to that, which is the model is responsive to. So the model is responsive to declines in trend.
So kind of just big picture how it plays out. Like you've got on the screen all the different things that go into the pie. So, you know, what I said is true, right, about the number of high school graduates going down over in the next several years, right? So that would be a number that would count as fewer high school graduates. So how did you get to these numbers?
The model is generally a tension between the prediction of how many Marylanders by age group will need to be educated in the next 10 years. That is a big draw. So if we're going to use the pie illusion, I haven't baked a pie in a while, but let's presume we have a sour fruit. A good portion of your pie is going to be sugar. It's going to draw your pie's recipe. We could presume that the projected population is like that, in that it is a big ingredient in our model, because we are trying to find this tension between the past performance of the model is both responsive to what is happening to institutions over a period of time, with demand for education. And so it's trying to find, so back to some of the accuracy piece, it's trying to find the sweet spot between where we are now, where the state envisions it will be in 10 years, and from a distribution of people by age, where might they fall into demand for higher education. So we don't presume 100% of all Marylanders 10 years from now will need to be educated. So that's where the patterns of past enrollment and past demand can influence the model.
That all makes sense. I guess like, if there's going to be this big drop of 18-year-olds in 3 years, where does that show up here? Because you don't see
It
a
won't show
big,
up now because we don't know that yet, and so we don't use the future.
But you work with the
prediction.
Department of Planning, right? Like, you can look at birth rates and see what's coming down the pike.
We just take the literally their population projections to answer. If so, this is a great discussion. If there are variables to reconsider for the model, we are performers of the model's math. That is our unit's responsibility. I would defer to my finance team as to how they might want the model to change in the future to respond to things like this.
I guess the question is this. We get population projections, right, from Maryland Department of Planning.
Mm-hmm.
Within that population projection, you know the high school students. They are part of that. You know how many 14 to 19-year-old are there. The question is that how that population influence your formula that gives you this output, because one could think this: if high school graduates are going to decline, why are we projecting increase in enrollment? See, that's, I guess,
right,
the question. How do we explain that?
So actually, we do not predict the enrollment will increase forever. So that is actually, so first of all, let me reiterate this again. Everything is based on population. So if the Maryland Department of Planning actually estimate the population will be peak at some level, and then turning to the downward trend, then our enrollment projection will also have this similar assumption that enrollment number will have the peak at some year and then going down. So to answer your other question, so basically one important thing is we could not just use what happened in the past few years to predict what will happen in the next 10 years. That's a very dangerous move. So basically, like, you can only use like 100 years to predict what happened next year, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good explanation. The other thing which you may want to explain is it's not year to year, right? So what we are saying that 10 years from now or 9 years from now, we'll have 19% more students eligible to go to college. Right, 19% more students will be eligible to go to college than what we have now. That's what.
Not only eligible, but yes, the potential to demand it.
Yeah. Demand,
that's right.
right.
The potential to demand higher education. Yes. Right. It is an optimistic model.
So maybe now would be a good time to address Commissioner Williams' question about sort of how your model, how it works versus reality, looking back, what you projected and what actually happened.
Sure. I actually would like to get to the line charts because I think that actually emphasizes as well how the model might.
So let me actually give you like disaggregated enrollment projections by the year of the projections and also by the levels. So basically, 424 is the full 1 year projection, and then we have the 10 years of a projection and by the segment and by the level. So
I just want to show them this number. I don't think you have to read all the numbers. I don't know if we can.
So
click on
yeah,
this one.
sorry for the small font of the numbers. And so, for example, for public 4-year undergraduate full-time, and next year we predict the number will be 95,936, and then they will be increasing to by 42033 to 98,809. So same thing for the public 4-year undergraduate part-time. It will start from the 56,000 and to the 59,000 10 years from now. And for public 4-year graduate and graduate full-time and part-time, will start from 26,000 and will end at 27,000 for full-time for part-time. And for full-time graduate, it will start from the 23,000 and end at 24,000. So that is how we predict the number progress per year. So as you can see from this trend, this is not a really sharp increasing or upward trend. There is the peak around the year of fall 29 or fall 2030, and then the number will decrease.
Right. And so I guess to get to the larger question and what we've just talked about, this is a perfect example of how aspects of the population projection, this darker purple line here, if we were to be able to hover over the actual value, it's about 101. And so this is a way in which the model visually shows that the state of Maryland is predicting a decrease in the population of college-going students for the state. So the model doesn't always go up, but because we're answering the question of how many Marylanders need to be educated, and this plays out with the other charts as well.
But where does it show the answer to Commissioner Williams' question?
Well, I'm going to get to that.
Oh, okay.
So there is no visual on Commissioner Williams' question. The answer is the model is better at being accurate for the four-year institutions than the community colleges, and that is in part due to the over 10-year decline in enrollment at the community colleges. 10 years ago, we looked at these numbers. 10 years ago, when whoever was on staff sat before the commissioners and predicted what would be happening in 2023, it was a very optimistic model. What informed that was the years prior of immense enrollment growth. So the model uses, in part, and combined with an optimistic prediction of how many Marylanders need to be educated, as well as the report describes, an assumption of the model is aspects of the in-state and out-of-state student proportion stays in place. And so we've also had, at that time, higher proportions of students who are, I will let Dr. Lin actually explain that part. But
how accurate is the model?
It's not accurate at predicting the community colleges enrollment, and it is better at predicting the four-year institutions.
And how accurate is it?
Oh, well, it is approximately, if we go back to 2013 when we presented this, we had predicted that there would be 64,000 undergraduates full-time at the community colleges, and the actual was 29,000.
So not accurate at all for community colleges. And what about for the 4 years?
We predicted for undergraduate full-time public 4 years, 95,000 students, and we actually had 90,000.
Gotcha.
And let me just, the 2020 to 2024 number, because of the pandemic, I almost want to know, in 2023, how accurate were you about 2019?
So we don't have the answer to that.
Because I think I'm thinking about those 4 years of the pandemic are particularly unusual. Sure. And so I'm thinking about the kind of more status quo years.
Sure. So I just want to ensure we do not go down the dangerous path. This is not a model that predicts annual enrollment every year. It predicts 10 years out who will need to be educated. So
fair.
For sure. And you don't have a crystal ball. We get that.
Yeah.
I think we're just, you've done all this hard work, right? You're doing this huge exercise. And it turns out that for community colleges, at least post-COVID, the model isn't that accurate. So have you tweaked the model to try to make it more accurate?
So actually, I can answer this question. So if you can find on the report page 2 and the second last paragraph, it explains why sometimes that, especially for community college, the number was not quite accurate, because if you can imagine 10 years ago when we at that time, let me give you a little bit more context. This model was not designed by me. It was designed and conducted by our contractor. He started his work maybe from 1990s. And so 2 years ago was the first year actually this model was brought back in the research office. And so at that time, all of the assumptions, methodologies was approved by the commissioners at that time. So basically what happened is 10 years ago, and it is predicted that 6% of Maryland residents aged from 15 to 24 was enrolled full-time in Maryland community colleges. And so that is how optimistic it was at that time. So basically at that time, contractor predict this number will continue in the next 10 years. But the next sentence, you will see what reality is. So no one actually foresee in next 10 years, fewer and fewer students are willing to attend community college as a full-time student. last year's number down to 3.7%. So that is why the community college enrollment was not enrollment projection was not quite accurate. So this downward trend was not being able to capture by anyone 10 years ago. So basically that is why community college was a little bit off from the hook. But so another reason why we did a great job for public 4-year, because there is always a very stable proportion of the students who are willing to attend public 4-year student. And then so that numbers is not going up forever or not going down forever. There are ups and downs. So we're able to capture some 10-year average, and we're able to apply this 10-year average for the next 10 years, and that will keep stable for the future. So that is why public 4-year are actually more accurate in terms of the projection. Another thing I just want to call out is also we're facing more and more out-of-state students. That is something we could not accurately capture in the model because we do not know the out-of-state population increase and how their out-of-state students make decisions and get enrolled in Maryland public institutions. So that is the two factors that combine together that cause some troubles for the community college.
So again, let me add something here. When I arrived at MHAC exactly a year ago, one of the things that I requested Dr. Lin to look at, what our model has projected for the last 10 years and what was the actual enrollment. And certainly in the case of community colleges, we noticed that our model is over projecting, to be clear. So she brilliantly proposed, improved model, actually a completely different model. And that was projecting, it was agreeing with the past 10 years. And also it was projecting, on fewer enrollments for community colleges. But I had some other questions, and before we kind of start using that, we wanted certain more analysis and study to be done. So we are in that phase. The model that Dr. Lin has come up with community colleges, we want that to be understood a little bit more and be discussed by the research folks at community colleges so that we can arrive at some common conclusions.
Yeah, and if I can explain a little bit more, is we are actually at this really important, significant moment that community college the past year firstly sees uptake in their enrollment. So if you consider any long-term trend for community college, I think this year and next year will be really important to consider if we are going to make a different model for community college, and whether or not we believe this, the number I just cited, 3.7% of the students who aged from 15 to 24 will attend full-time in Maryland Community College will continue for next 10 years, or this number will actually resume to the earlier higher level. So I think it is definitely a horrible thing if I said in next 10 years, we only have 3.7 students attend community college. And then if that's a wrong projection, the cost will be community college will never receive enough resources they need to educate the student, upcoming student they will need to educate next 10 years. So that is why I think I don't speak fully for the concerns that from my finance colleagues and the secretary, but we're still studying about other ways. But as I explained in the last paragraph in the report, actually I briefly introduced you the core concept of the new model. That new model will be more responsive to the most recent change of the enrollment trend that we see on the community college. But again, as I mentioned, because it is really quickly respond to the recent change, it will be unavoidably potentially underestimate the enrollment projection in next 10 years if we see community college actually retrieve their earlier higher level of the enrollment.
In community college enrollments are very sensitive to several things. So predictions there are difficult. And at the same time, the new model that Dr. Lin came up We want a thorough understanding and analysis of that, and particularly with community colleges in collaboration with their research folks to make sure that for the next 10 years we are adequately creating capacity at community colleges where a lot of first generation students seek their education, number one. Number two, community colleges, all 16 of them together have about 150,000 non-credited students. And creating a space for that training, non-credit work is also important. So side by side, that work is also going on, how to accommodate a space need for that very important work, and certainly influence of online work. All three are being done together. We want to be extremely cautious in coming up with the formula and projections so that we are creating facilities that are needed at these institutions.
And again, I can't see my colleagues, so I hope I'm not stepping on anyone. I said a couple quick things that might resolve, I think maybe some of this, not resolve, but hopefully kind of get us on the connections. I think all of us have a version of Commissioner Williams' question in our head, and it sounds like, Dr. Schmertz, as usual, you and your team are thinking about this. One process step, and I'm looking at you, Chair, is we have another standing committee, the Finance Committee, which actually might be a good group of people to think about this in a more longitudinal way. I know we've not reconstituted that yet, but it actually might be a very important piece of work for them to think about it as we put that back together. I think I had a question about how UMGC is factored into the here, because UMGC is a different type of beast. And I'm just curious kind of where they show up in these numbers or if they're somewhere else.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Sorry to interrupt you. Did you finish your question?
I had one other bigger question, which
let
makes
me make my notes in case I
No,
forgot
so
your
it-
first question.
Yes, we'd love to just see where UMGC is reflected, 'cause I know that they're different, or if they're not, then that's also fine. The other bigger thing I had was, let me repeat what I've heard. Basically, the model and the projections come from assumptions about population, which make a lot of sense. I get that, which is kind of the supply of people who could actually be. There's another way to look at it, which is from an economic demand point of view, which is the economy requires X amount of this. And therefore, if the economy needs that, higher ed will educate toward that. And that's another way to think about that. I'm curious how you incorporate kind of economic projections. We also know economics plays a huge role in community college. We know that when the economy generally is pretty good, community college enrollments go down, and vice versa. So I'm curious how you think about economic projections and economic needs as you do this, because we know it has an effect on enrollments pretty substantially.
So let me get you first the question how UMGC was reflected in those numbers. So at least for headcount numbers, UMGC was included in the numbers. Only for FTDE, so daytime, full-time equivalent numbers, because that is majorly used to reflect the actual student who will be on campus and need.
Sorry, FTE, not FTDE.
FTDE.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
So that is only one number that do not include UMGC.
Got it. Thank you.
So other numbers.
Thank you.
Yeah. So to respond to your second question about economics, so you see actually, can we actually go back to the presentation? So actually the economy was actually incorporate as adjusted factor. So let me see if I can. Actually, let me go back.
I'll do it. Wait.
So next slide. So so you see, actually we have the base enrollment. Actually, we adjusted this enrollment numbers by the income level, and so we understand economic reason can be a big important reason for a student to consider whether or not they want to enroll or not enroll in institutions. So unfortunately we do not have the 10 years economic projection because it's even harder thing for economics to do. Like no one can see 10 years from now how GDP of the US will look like. So basically we use historical trend and
But let me push there for a second. I think about my time in the federal government, whether it was the Fed, whether it was the Office of Management and Budget, there are people who did it. Did they do it well? Different consideration. But are they any less or more accurate than population? it's a little easier. It's a little easier, but I would say it's not impossible, and there are bodies who do it. No one does it well, but it's an encouragement that I would make, because we know, particularly for community college who are already not accurate, we know economy is one of those big roles. So again, you all are smarter people than we are, and you all do this every day. But it's something that, at least from the outside, seems. I think something is better than nothing, even if it is inaccurate. And I would definitely never say that should explain 100% of the model. Definitely not. That would be too much to ask.
Yeah, so without knowing more about the accuracy of the economy projections, for now we just use historical economy factors. So that is income per capita for Maryland in past 10 years, and then we just adopt this income factor as an additional factor to the enrollment projection. Say, if the economy is actually going up, and in past 10 years, and we pretty confident that this is a very healthy economy cycle, and then we will actually minus some enrollment numbers from the base enrollment numbers. But if we see actually economy is actually stable or actually decreasing, and so we will adjust the enrollment numbers as well accordingly. So that is what we currently did with our current model. But I really appreciate that you point out there are some long-term economy projections out there. So I love to actually discuss more and also test a little bit about how accurate that is, and if we actually consider that 10-year projection, GDP projection, as one of the factor. And so I just want to know how much, how large the factor it will play in the enrollment projection model.
Thank you.
Can you please put this screen back so we can see our fellow commissioners? I just want to see if anyone has any questions at this point. Any questions from the commission? All right. Seeing none, please continue on. And you can assume that we've read the slides, so I don't want you to have to waste your time just reading the slides to us. But the why behind it, the analysis, is super helpful, so thank you.
Okay, so I will speed up to finish. Do not read up all of the numbers, but for community colleges and we predict that 10 years from now, that by fall 2033, the community college full-time student will increase to 824. And then for the that's for the part-time, and for the full-time, the number will increase to 39,731. And then next will be FTE. And
I think you don't need to read all of them.
Yeah, so I don't need to repeat all of the numbers. So basically for statewide total, so the number will increase by 23.4%. And for public full year, the number will increase to 19%. And then for community colleges, the FTE will increase by 33.4%. And next slide is FTDE. So statewide total will increase by 21%. And then for public full year, this is where the UMGC was excluded, and the number will increase by 15.3% by fall 2033. And then community college student will experience the 33% increase. And this is how the number looks like in the time trend. And finally, we go to non-credit. So let me just make a note here. So there was a typo on the handout you have in front of you. So let me correct again. So by fall 2032, we predict the non-credit FTE number will increase by 18.8% to 20,741. And this is how the number progress year by year. And finally, this is my recommendation. It is recommended that Maryland Higher Education Commission accept the 2024 to 2033 enrollment projections and approve their distribution to the public campuses and the interested state agencies. So let me remind you again, so what you need to prove is the model and the numbers produced by the model.
Thank you. Any questions from our commissioners? Commissioner Williams. I'm sorry, and then Commissioner Agu.
No, it might be the same question. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much, and thank you so much for the data and the explanation. I know it's detailed and there's so much to it. I'm looking at the document that you shared with us earlier with 17 pages on it, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding your slide deck versus the data in the charts. So for example, on page 11 for the total public 4-year FTE, and I noticed that's where UMG is excluded for FDTE, you have it from 153 to 159. Do you see where I am?
Yes.
Okay. And then if you go to the community colleges, which is total community colleges on page 615, it's from 76 to 77.
Yes,
About
that's correct.
1,500. And then for the non-credit, it's on the last page, and it's what you just referenced. It goes from 18,000 to 20,700.
Yeah.
So, and I guess that's the 18%. So when I look at these numbers, they're not significantly bigger. There's a 6,000 person increase for FTEs for the public 4 years. There's almost flat for total community colleges, and then there's 2,000 or 2,500 students for non-credit. So when you say 18%, that sounds big, but in terms of the actual numbers, it's a relatively small amount. So I just would like to have some discussion about that point, because my takeaway from that is that the numbers, maybe to the secretary's point, are reflecting a smaller population, and therefore my takeaway is relatively flat change or prediction over a 10-year period. Do I have that right, or you can correct my thinking?
No, actually, let me correct you one thing. So that 18.8% increase actually is comparing to the actual number. So that is actually comparing to full 2022. So basically that is not compared to the first year you see on the table, because the first year you see from the table is actually the 1 year projection. So that's why the number looks a little bit flat. Basically that is, you see, if you compare your first column to the last column, that is quite flat, because the 10-year projections were not so different from the 1 year projection in terms of the size of the increase. But if you actually compare this final 10 years from now, the number, and compare that number to the actual number that we lastly observed from last year, and that was the 18.8%.
Okay, I think I get that point. I think that, thank you for your slide presentation. I was trying to crosswalk your slides and your high-level takeaways versus the data charts. And my crosswalk leads me to conclude that the increases are very modest, but the percentages almost, if you only look at that, it sounds like, oh, we have, 330 some thousand in potential demand on one end of your presentation. But when you look at the actual 10-year out versus today, it's 6,000 for this group, 1,500 for this group, and 2,500 for this group, which is, to me, more important that, that's what you're saying for capital budget projection. Do I have that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'm looking at Mr. Newman and our other colleague here. I think one thing that would be helpful, and I'm thinking to that meeting we're going to have in September, that's going to come up. I think one thing that would be helpful to the point of the assumptions that you all use in planning around. So if I have an additional student, how much space is required for class personnel, the personnel who support them, so on and so forth. I think understanding that, not necessarily today and right now, but I think in the future would also be helpful, because I expect every institution will ask for increases. And I think understanding the assumptions that will come with those per each new student, even though the numbers may not be big, I think will be helpful as we make some of these choices and ask, I think, some of those questions. Because I had some of the same conclusions that Commissioner Williams had, but I'm trying to remember. It's almost like in healthcare. Every body that comes into a hospital, even though it may be only 30 or 40, has a cost, usually significant cost attached to it in terms of the people that support that body, and also the infrastructure that does. And I don't have a handle on those numbers yet, which you all do. So I think that would be helpful just to know as we get closer to that part of the budget cycle.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do a presentation on how we calculate space needs whenever you guys would like me to come and do that presentation. But I also do want to emphasize the space needs calculations do not equate to real dollars in any way, right? They're only one part of the justification for a capital project. They don't actually equate to dollars.
I also had one process question, which was, I know we're being asked to approve this. Can you tell me just the process timeline in terms of, for you all in kind of the finance team, when do you all need these figures approved? And then secondly, for the institutions, when do they usually get these numbers and just make decisions off them?
So our timeline, we actually have started the FY26 budget process now.
Okay.
The instructions were sent out to the colleges recently, within the last couple of weeks. They have to send their information to us by July 1, which includes in there, and this is even for colleges who do not request money next year, everybody's got to send to us some reports that calculate the space needs on campus. And these projections are needed to complete those reports, which are due July 1.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right. The team here, the staff team, is asking us commissioners to accept these projections and approve their distribution to the public, the campuses, and interested state agencies. Do my fellow commissioners feel like we're in a position to make that motion and do that today? And if so, is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the projections and the recommendation.
Yeah, and I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays or abstentions? All right. I will note that the fact that the community college projections have been so off does cause me concern, and I'm glad that this is being looked into, and I'm glad that this is done every year, so that next year, if we have potentially a different formula, a different model, we could tweak that. I mean, the fact that they've been so off, I think, is concerning, and the projections are only as good as how accurate they are. So that does cause me concern, but I have a lot of confidence in you all here on the staff team, and hopefully you will look into other models and perhaps come back to us a year from now with a more accurate model that we could use for the 10 years from next year.
And first of all, thank you. I know how hard this is, and so really thank you for taking our questions and doing all the work. I think one thing that would also help us is, to the extent that we can be briefed on the model before the projections come, in terms of like, here are the things that we're going to take into account, so we can ask questions, give thoughts in. But I think that would be helpful. Again, I know that's also hard work, but any lead time that we can get between probably this time next year and the presentation of the model, I think will be helpful to myself and fellow commissioners.
Yeah, and I would just add, like, I still don't, as a layperson who's not a researcher, and I have so much respect for what you all do, and I join Commissioner Agu and others in thanking you, I don't really understand how the dip that I've spoken to many college personnel are worried about the lower number of population of young people coming up into the college system. I don't really understand how that's reflected here and what that's offset against. So it might be helpful to just have next time, or even an email to us afterwards, just a layperson's explanation as to kind of the whys behind this. I trust you all. You're scientists. You're very smart people. The model for four-year colleges has been pretty accurate, but I don't completely understand the why behind the model.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I think that's a good suggestion, Madam Chair. We will do that. Again, I'll say that the work has already been started, and we will look at that. I just want to reemphasize this, that predicting enrollment for four-year institutions compared to predicting enrollment at community colleges is vastly different, and it's a much more challenging work. It's like, if you're looking at
the community college part is more challenging. Yeah.
If you're looking at elections where there are two parties, that prediction compared to elections in other parts of the world where you have 14 different parties running for different elected positions, that becomes significantly different. And folks who do this for living, they will tell you that each time one more parameter is added, your projections get off. Having said that, I was wondering about this, and I asked Dr. Lin to look at our existing model and see how it has projected for the past 10 years. And we certainly noticed what you all have noticed, and we tried to make some corrections. The model that Dr. Lin presented, it agrees with the past, but can it be reliable for the future? That's where I wasn't sure, and I think we need to do a little bit more thoughtful analysis, work with our colleagues and experts at community colleges, and then see what is the best way to move forward.
Thank you. Commissioner Howe, did you have something to add? I thought you saw your hand up. No? Okay. All right. Thank you all very much. All right. Our final agenda item from Dr. Dow and Mr. Newman, update on Governor Moore and Lieutenant Governor Miller's plan on MHEC initiatives.
So I just wanted to provide the context. Moore Miller Estate Plan, a very ambitious plan, vision for the administration, has 10 priorities. 10 priorities, and out of those 10 priorities, there are two. Priority number 2, that's setting up Maryland students for success, and priority number 4, connecting Marylanders to jobs. Those are two priorities where MHEC is directly involved. Priority 2 we share with MSDE, our colleagues in this building, and priority 4 we share with Department of Labor. And within those we have specific KPIs, and we wanted you to know that we are working very hard. We are doing everything to make sure that we fully deliver what is expected from Maryland Higher Education Commission. So priority number 2, Dr. Dow, can you and then Jeff, because financial aid stuff is there in priority 2, and then priority 4 as well. Thank you.
Sure. So thank you, Chair Motz, Commissioners, Secretary Rye. I will just briefly summarize what the highlights are in priority 2 around every student succeeding, leave no child behind. Early childhood education, college and career readiness, and teacher preparation. Those are the 3 main areas in which MHEC is playing a significant role, and it aligns very well with Blueprint initiatives and AIB. So we are working with the governor's office to identify appropriate KPIs around teacher preparation and college attendance and success in graduating and success after college, which kind of ties into more jobs for Marylanders, what happens to students after they graduate. So again, as Secretary Rye noted, we are working through both KPIs and specific strategies. Some of those strategies focus on transfer. Some of those strategies focus on what do we mean by college and career readiness. And again, aligns very nicely with AIB and Blueprint initiatives. So that's the highlight for on the academic side of priority 2. There are some elements around financial aid, and I'll turn to my colleague, Jeff Newman.
Thank you. One of the elements is to look at the Workforce Shortage Student Assistance Grant, to look at its applicability to current needs in the economy, to see if the areas that we cover in the grant itself are still applicable, probably working with Labor and Commerce to look at need areas to see if there should be any adjustment to the areas covered. We currently cover 8 areas in that grant, which were historically smaller programs within our financial aid budget that were put together in this one program. We used to have 35 programs, several of which only served a few students. So an analysis was performed years ago where we took the smaller workforce-oriented programs and put them into this one sort of umbrella program. But the question is, are those programs still valid in today's economy? Should we be looking at, and that's what we'll be doing over the next year. And we're reestablishing the Workforce Shortage Advisory Council.
That's correct.
So
Yes.
to also look at these issues.
So let me just share, so just as Assistant Secretary Newman noted, there is an advisory council that we will convene in the coming months around workforce shortages. That advisory council, as written, is only supposed to advise around scholarship, the use of a specific scholarship for workforce shortages. We have now had the aha moment, which I think you all are having right now, is, well, we also have to do this workforce demand and emerging need analysis. But we have the immediate need for scholarships and making sure that our scholarships are well aligned. So over the next 6 weeks, we are going to figure out how to merge those two activities so that we are ensuring that when we design the list of statewide need and emerging needs, there are scholarships available for students to pursue those careers and occupations. So it's kind of a perfect storm of things coming together in terms of identifying workforce and emerging needs.
And another group of slides related to financial aid pretty much have the goal of improving access to financial aid. This includes looking at the regulations to make sure they're up to date and that they're open to allowing the Office of Student Financial Aid to perform their job in getting financial aid out to students. And we have begun that. We're having weekly meetings to review the regulations, starting with the larger programs that are very, highly impacted by regulations, so we can make adjustments or even possibly remove the regulations. Several years ago, we had guidelines and policies for these programs, so we could be more flexible and move more quickly if we needed to make adjustments. All these were put into regulations, and it became a bit cumbersome to try to change regulations on an annual basis to accommodate changes to the scholarship program. So that's part of our analysis. Do we need regulations for this program? Can we go back to guidelines and policies that we can follow where we can be a little more adept at making changes quickly? Another item is changing the Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship to increase its student eligibility, and I think we've seen the efforts of those movements over the last 2 years, particularly with decentralizing the program and also opening the eligibility up by dropping GPA requirements and making the age range a wider range. Also, and you may be very interested in this one, is developing statewide training for high school guidance counselors, financial aid professionals, and nonprofit organizations on FAFSA. So again, we're focusing efforts on trying to educate people, get them more involved, so that at the grassroots level and other levels, we can make people aware, continue to make people aware. I think they've had sort of a shock awareness this year about the FAFSA, but in a little more grassroots type of effort to build the FAFSA knowledge so that students know that they need to do this when they're anticipating entering college. This also includes on-site training by MHEC staff, OSFA staff particularly, which can be difficult, but we're going to try to overcome the barriers that we have to that, such as travel, distance, and that kind of thing.
Thank you. Any questions?
I had one on the Workforce Shortage Advisory Council. 2 questions. One, who do you anticipate being part of that? And then secondly, which is probably a bigger concern, is it similar or duplicative of other bodies that whether it's Governor's Workforce Board or Department of Labor has? Because to make things simpler, if there was another body somewhere in state government already doing this, I would just say MHEC, can we just be part of that? Or do we need to create another one? If that is not the case, then proceed, because it's a super important body of work. But I just want to know who's going to be on that, and then is it overlapping with some other existing body that might already do that we can just be a part of?
So yes and no. The advisory council is laid out in statute, and it is very prescriptive. It has about 20 different either appointed or assigned positions. The legislation is a little outdated in the fact that it does not necessarily include important stakeholders like CTE and Governor's Workforce Development Board. It certainly has a labor representative, college representatives. So we will convene per the legislation as required, but it is something that we're looking into to see if we would want to make a recommendation to change the legislation, how this can better align with the work that we will need to do for state plan and academic program review. So that's something that we will have a plan laid out over the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And if I'm not mistaken, Assistant Attorney General Ward can correct me, I believe that's in section 11105 of the education article.
I will take your word for it.
If, in case you want to,
I will take your word for it.
in case you
Thank
need a little
Liz.
reading material before you go to sleep tonight.
If I need, yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Now, the other goal, State Plan Priority 4, was leave no one behind by connecting Marylanders to jobs. And there were 3 items related to financial aid in those items. One was to offer tuition reimbursements for nurses who practice in shortage areas. The main question I have right now is what is the state tolerance in the budget to offer tuition reimbursements to students? We're sitting in difficult budget times right now. We have to make very important decisions on what can be funded and what can be funded. Is this something that could work where we could offer tuition reimbursements to students in, being trained in shortage areas?
Predicting the population and the economy is very hard, and the state legislature is almost as hard as predicting that. But this is me speaking on behalf of me. I don't think it's impossible. That's me because of how important it is to so many important stakeholders across the state. But I have no crystal ball for what happens at the State House.
Yeah. But on a better note, another item is expanding the Nurse Support 2 program. The Nurse Support 2 program is a program that we work with the Health Services Cost Review Commission. We receive a portion of their hospital fees every year, about $19 million a year, to fund nurses who are interested in becoming credentialed to teach nursing. We've had a problem with a shortage of faculty in nursing over the years, often because it's often more lucrative to practice as a nurse than to teach. So this Nurse Support Program 2, which is administered by 2 very, very good MHEC staff, currently, hoping to get a third, is specially funded. It's not general funds. So it comes in from these hospital fees. And we are having conversations with the Health Services Cost Review Commission. Everything needs to be done through them because they're the ones who actually give us the funding, to see if we can expand the program, either add new areas that we haven't been addressing before, or expand where we're currently providing funds to people to train.
And when you say areas, do you mean geographies or do you mean like specialties?
Both, actually.
Okay.
Yep.
Commissioner Howe, did you have a question?
Yeah, well, I just have a comment because I couldn't get myself off unmute forever and ever and ever. So, I'm not particularly proficient with my computer. But anyway, I just want to say with relation to all of the work that's being done by the staff to formulate these projections is extremely impressive. None of us can predict the future, so they have done the best they can do with making the assumptions that they believe need to be made. If indeed we have a recession that occurs within the next year or so, which is predicted, who knows what in the world will happen, but we have to deal with the best that we can. So my extreme compliments to the staff of the commission and to Dr. Ryan and the others who work so hard to get us the information that we can look at in order to try to make intelligent decisions is most appreciated. So that was what I wanted to say a long time ago, but now I'm off.
Thank you,
And I'll
Commissioner
put
Howe. I
myself
agree.
back on mute.
So on behalf of Dr. Schmertz and Lynn, thank you very much. Do you want to talk about any of these items?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
And I have one at the end.
Sure. So there are kind of two big themes in the More Job for Marylanders when it comes to academic affairs initiatives. One is, again, this workforce alignment. Are we educating a population for tomorrow's jobs? And there is some explicit focus on STEM and the STEM fields. So we will engage in an exercise of identifying our existing STEM programs, again, tied with this larger analysis of workforce and emerging needs, and having conversations strategically with institutions about expanding programs, developing programs, changing programs to meet both the workforce, the larger workforce need, whether it's nurses, teachers, but also specifically in the context of STEM. So that's one initiative specifically to STEM and making sure we are graduating people with the right skill sets and knowledge. The second academic affairs related item in Strategy 4 is around special populations, in particular near completers, students that have some college but no degree, and reconnecting them either to higher education or to other post-secondary opportunities, whether that's apprenticeship or other workforce education-based training programs. Let's think through how we can do that within existing resources, whether that's through local job centers, local workforce development boards, and the like, and our colleges and universities, of course, they all have near completer initiatives, but focusing some attention on those students that have some college, no degree, and thinking through what's the best next step for them. So those are the two on academic affairs.
And then finally, at the end of Priority 4 is a strategy to pilot an outcome-based funding initiative. This is, well, I've told Dr. Rye in the past, but several years ago we undertook an effort to try to develop a performance-based funding model for a portion of higher education funding. And I've looked at some models recently from different states. There's a lot of question out there at this point in time is on how effective these models are at actually achieving the results for which they're designed. I think we've seen better results at the four-year segment than the community college segment for taking a portion of the funding and making it outcome-based. So I'm still reading and researching to get re-engage with this issue, and perhaps with the reconstituted finance committee, this could be something that we could discuss and review and research and see where we could go with this effort.
Yeah. Great. Anything else?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for the updates. I will say that, the plan, as I see it more, is really visionary. It's reflective of the needs of our state today, but it also thinks about vision for tomorrow. How do we prepare Marylanders for a better tomorrow? And we have monthly meetings, third Wednesday. And you should know that as a performance cabinet has been formed, and governor and lieutenant governors, the governor, they attend these meetings, and they're very engaged, and they ask very thoughtful questions and great suggestions. So I just want to assure our commissioners that we are doing everything we can, and we are fully engaged with the process, and we will completely deliver on expectations that's there from Maryland Higher Education Commission on those two priorities.
Great. And this is a 10-point plan, is that right?
Yes,
And
it's a
we
10
have a role in 3 of them, right? 2, 3, and 4, you said?
two and four.
Oh, okay. Still, 20%.
Well, we
so-
may be involved in others too, but 2 and 4 very direct KPIs. Yeah.
Okay. And we've been given the KPIs by the governor's office?
Yes, but this is it's conversational. We can change, we can adjust things. That nothing is completely mandated, except the expectations that are there, right? So we can change, we can tweak things, but generally, yes, it comes from the
Well, I remember when they had the press conference several months ago and the governor himself was going through the PowerPoint. It was very exciting and reading the documents. And I mean, I think the fact that it's across the entire state government with all the agencies, that the very highest levels of government, the governor and lieutenant governor engaged, is very exciting for the state, and also real opportunity for us as an agency and a commission. And I was just leaning over, whispering to Commissioner Agu that to the extent that we're trying to streamline and not duplicate other plans or councils, to the extent that the work that Commissioner Agu is leading us in with respect to our new higher education plan, pretty much everything in our plan probably relates to one of the 2 prongs that we're tasked with. So I think it's great to kind of crosswalk those, and as we formulate the state plan, just make it clear exactly which part of the plan fits into one of the governor's 10 priorities. It sounds like either priority 2 or 4. I don't have it in front of me, but I think that'll be great, and it'll get a lot of attention, not just from the governor's office, but the other agencies with whom we need to work so closely, labor and commerce and MSDE, to make sure that we're all moving in the same direction and everyone's working from the same document. So I kind of see our higher ed plan as being, very closely aligned with the governor and lieutenant governor's 10-point plan. So it's great. Very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're a little bit ahead of time, which is a good situation to be in. Before we leave, there's been some comments made about the now dormant Finance Committee, and I'm looking to Assistant Attorney General Ward if there were an interest among the commission in reviving that committee. Can you just let us know how we should go about that? Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. Is it something we would do maybe at a future meeting, or?
While the Assistant Attorney General is looking, I believe the process would be similar to how we reconstitute the Education Policy Committee, since it is a standing committee versus an ad hoc committee, but the Assistant Attorney General will tell us for sure.
Oh, okay, this is the committee that's in your bylaws?
It sounds like yes.
Yes,
There's a
Yeah.
standing committee.
Yes.
Yeah, then it's the same process.
Okay. And can you just walk us, lay people through that?
That's the committee that you would handle it about the same way. Since it's whatever you're standing, you would just go ahead and appoint since it's 12 of you now, you can't have a quorum on there. So it would have to be
6.
No more than 6.
Okay.
And of course, it would have to be open, subject to the open meeting, since it's already established by
standing
your
committee, right.
bylaws. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it seems like it's a good to bring back that committee. Are there
Certainly
other
can.
standing committees that have not been,
I think it's only those 2
just those 2?
that are in the
Okay.
bylaws.
Well, again, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but perhaps we can discuss this at the next commission meeting. And in the interim, look deep into yourself and your skills and your interest, and see if you might be interested in serving on or even chairing the Finance Committee, because I think that reference was made to it earlier, and I think that there's certainly a lot of opportunity there. So, all right, with that,
Chair Motz,
Yeah.
what is the purpose of the Finance Committee as it was constituted in the past?
I'm gonna have to defer to Soma because I was not here.
I think Jeff Newman's answering.
Oh,
I have my own layperson's
I
take on
was
it, but I'd
here.
rather hear from Mr. Newman.
I was here. We
Yeah.
just celebrated my 25th anniversary.
You were definitely here.
It was really much subject matter issues. If it's related to finance policy, it would be considered by the committee. We used to work in a committee form where each committee would consider issues related to its subject matter area and then bring it to the full commission at commission meetings. That's how we traditionally had worked. This was taken apart 7 or 8 years ago, where we formed special little committees, but we didn't stick with the bylaw committees, the finance policy and the education. So it's very similar to the General Assembly working with their budget committees or their finance committees. They focus on the issues related to each of the, under each committee and then the commission. So you end up having a few more commission meetings because you would have the committee meeting to make decisions, and then you'd have the full commission meeting where the committee would bring recommendations to the full commission for action.
Well, we certainly don't want more meetings just for the sake of meetings. But I do feel like there are a lot of, perhaps it would be helpful to send the bylaws around to the full commission, setting forth the purpose of the committee as stated in the bylaw, and then we can discuss whether we think we need that. Yeah, go ahead, Soma.
I just brought it up online so I can read it. The Finance Policy Committee shall consider and report to the Commission on all matters relating to 1, the operating and capital budgets of public institutions of post-secondary education in the state. 2, the administration of state funds for non-public institutions of higher education. 3, the administration and supervision of the state's scholarship, grant and aid, and tuition assistance programs. And 4, the Commission's own operating budget and financial management.
Gotcha. That was my layperson's understanding, that and really drilling down more, particularly on the budgets and the financial aid piece. So I think we can decide as a commission whether we all want to do that as commissioners at commission meetings or whether we want to have a separate committee as was done in the past. And we can discuss that at the next meeting, or if people want to discuss it now, we can discuss it now because we have a little extra time. Do folks have an opinion? Dr. Burnham?
Well, since you called on me, my preference would be to discuss it in commission meetings and not create another meeting for some of the commissioners.
Yes.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Commissioner Howe, did you raise your hand?
I agree with what Commissioner Burnham just said. I don't see any purpose in creating something just to have more meetings. I think we do it very well now, and I would be in favor of just doing it at our regular commission meetings.
Fair enough. I think that makes a lot of sense. Anybody want to chip in on that? I do think that I'm sensing from our group here as we have started to gel over the last several months, and again, Commissioner Bands, we're very happy to have you join us, that there's a real interest in drilling down on the budget and the finance piece. And the September budget meeting last time was the second meeting for many of us. And so a lot of our questions, Commissioner Agu's questions today, have been forward thinking about 5 months from now what the budget meeting is going to look like. So I guess, since we are electing not to reconstitute this standing committee, I would just encourage my fellow commissioners to continue to look with a discerning eye in the presentations and the decisions we make towards the budget, because the budget is such an important document and a sort of important piece of what we do. Okay. Anything else to add? All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? All right. The ayes have it. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.